Hello everybody, welcome back to our diversity and behavior analysis series with Dr. D from ABA with Dr. D. Today we're going to review an article that I was actually reviewing this morning. You're able to see some highlighted segments of this particular article on cultural responsiveness in applied behavior analysis. It's a self-assessment by Bolu and Jimenez Gomez. Phenomenal article. I'm going to give you all the link right there so you can go take a look. But very, very much in tune with, what we have been talking about in regards to some of the needs about understanding our own, values, our own limitations, and overall what we know, right, about diversity and also about ourselves. How much are we able to comprehend, like I said, our own areas of need, right, as professionals. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can zoom in a bit more with this particular article here so you guys can have a better view here. So I'm going to read the abstract really quickly. So it says here that culture has a substantial impact on a wide range of behaviors related to behavioral research and services such as report building, preferences for specific targets and treatments, communications, and even the quality of healthcare. The need for professionals in the field of applied behavior analysis, or ABA, to incorporate culturally responsive practices is underscored by the current and projected increase in diversity in the United States. Further, the update of this to the Ethics Code, BACB 2020, supports addressing diversity in behavior analytic practice. Self-assessment of one's values, biases, and culture are a critical step in delivering culturally responsive services. The purpose of this paper is threefold. So A is to introduce a framework for cultural responsiveness in ABA. B, to showcase research and practice recommendations from within and outside the field of ABA in the areas of self-assessment. And C, to inspire research in self-assessment to support cultural responsiveness in ABA. Now, I'm not going to give too much right away. I'm going to save some of that information. You're going to see some of the great stuff that this article has. But why I love this article is because aside from talking about the need and diversity and all that stuff that we've been mentioning in previous segments, this particular article provides an avenue. It gives you a tool, solutions for how we can potentially look into how we can address some of these particular limitations we have in our field, which is a limitation of diversity. Okay, so I'm going to review some more of these highlighted areas. So the culture to which a person belongs can have profound impacts on the healthcare they receive due to provider biases and discriminatory systems that support those who belong to particular groups and harm those who do not. Okay, so here it says, for instance, racial and ethnic minoritized groups experience lower quality healthcare even when insurance status and income are controlled, which can have serious implications on mortality. So that's a really important piece right there mentioned, that even though you have the same quote unquote level of healthcare, if you are not, once again, if you are from a minority, you don't receive the same level of care based on some of the research here that they're citing. And I go furthermore, Black children experience racial disparities in timing of diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and may be more likely to be misclassified with intellectual disability. In addition, Black and Latino children are less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD and disproportionately are more likely to experience school suspensions and exposures than white children. So very, very strong, information here being provided in this article. Stuff that we've been definitely talking about, the fact that because you belong to a specific minority group, in this case Black or Latino, you're more likely to get in trouble in school, right? You're more likely to be seen in certain ways, and this could also lead to some of these very unfortunate situations such as suspensions and expulsions that you may see there. And then they go on and say that the recent update to the Ethic Code for Behavior Analysts by Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or BACB 2020, supports addressing diversity in behavior analytic practice and requires that certificants obtain training in the area of cultural diversity, which is something that we have been harping on. And I think there's an obvious need for more tools, more research, and more materials for people to utilize to work on the whole aspect of cultural diversity. This right here, it's going to provide some data about the diversity, how much diversity we're seeing today, how much diversity we're expecting in the future. So here we go. So lately, the 2018 U.S. Census data projected that children from minoritized groups For instance, groups other than non-Hispanic white would account for more than 50% of the child population by the year 2020, and this trend is already observed with children under 15. In addition, the U.S. Census data predict that by 2028, the foreign-born share of population will reach a historic high since the year 1850. And by 2030, international migration is expected to be the primary source of population growth in the U.S. Frey highlights how these data support the need for organizations to focus on children to proactively prepare for more diverse populations. Okay, very clear. Diversity relates to various demographic variables, including a person's race, ethnicity, age, generation, education, socioeconomic status, religion or spiritual belief, language, nationality, geographic location, disability, gender identity, and sexual orientation. Okay, so these are different variables to consider. Okay, so definitely very, very telling how much of a need there is for more diversity training in our field, more diversity as a whole in our field, because the data shows that there will be more diversity in the population we will be serving. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. Here I highlighted this because I think this is very important, something I talked about in the past, which is humility. Here they say that from a behavioral perspective, cultural humility involves understanding that one's view of the world is impacted by one's individual learning history, and that different environmental learning histories impact the behavior of others. Okay, so we have to be humble enough to understand that we don't know it all, and that we cannot be able to, basically discount the fact that we ourselves have a learning history, and that impacts and influences our behavior as practitioners and as human beings as a whole. Okay, so something really awesome that this particular article did is they defined, or they provided some very good context about cultural competence, which they consider being a crucial part of understanding or key diversity term, and cultural humility, which is something I just talked about, and cultural responsiveness. Okay, so I'm going to start off with cultural competence, which was taken out of Sue and Torino's article, and this is where it goes. So it says that lifelong process in which one works to develop the ability to engage in actions or create conditions that maximize the optimal development of client and client systems. Multicultural counseling competence is aspirational and consists of counselors acquiring awareness, knowledge, and skills needed to function effectively in a pluralistic democratic society. So ability to communicate, interact, negotiate, and intervene on behalf of clients from diverse backgrounds. And on organizational societal level, advocating effectively to develop new theories, practices, policies, and organizational structures that are more responsive to all groups. Okay, so very, very cool, clear definition there for cultural competence. For cultural humility, they mentioned that cultural humility is a lifelong process that requires continuous self-reflection to produce a dynamic partnership that reduces power imbalances between clinician and client, and requires respect for all and lack of superiority toward another's cultural background. Wow, that's great. Basically saying that we never stop learning, right? This is a process that we will continue having to need to understand that we don't know it all, and that we will constantly need to be learning new stuff. And in regards to the humility aspect of that is so crucial, and that we need to understand that we're not superior more than the clients we serve, that we need to understand that we are in a partnership. We're there to work together to support each other. Okay. Cultural responsiveness here is defined as using the cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives of ethnically diverse students as conducts for teaching them more effectively, which is something I really believe lacks not only in behavior analysis, but as a whole in the educational system, right? And I think even today we're seeing political and politicians arguing the importance of not introducing too much, of the whole aspect of trying to control the cultural stuff that's being taught in schools, which to me is, once again, it's very, very troubling. But here it just once again emphasizes that. So these, once again, is something that I'm going to provide a link for this particular article, so you can all check it out. You can look at the citations there where they were able to take these particular definitions. But thank you so much for this information here, for these two great authors of this article. I'm going to go forward down a little bit more, because I'm going to talk a little bit more about the areas that they talk about that we ourselves can work on. One of the areas they mention, or one of the dimensions that they mentioned to being a culturally responsive behavior analyst, is awareness. Okay, so they talked about awareness. They talked about knowledge. they talked about skills. Well, let's look at awareness first. So awareness is considered assess of one's culture, discriminate and attack cultural variables that impact behavior, respect and appreciate differences, use a posture of cultural humility with individuals from cultural backgrounds different than our own. Discriminate one biases behavior and their impact on services, including both client and supervision of trainees. Assess limits of scope of competence regarding to cultural diversity and access additional support or provide referrals as needed. Okay, so basically, in other words, seek support if you don't quite understand how to be able to work with a particular family that you're not too sure in regards to have a different cultural background from yours that may be impacting the treatment of the client. Knowledge. Okay, so going back to knowledge. So track past and current treatment of minoritized groups with respect to social political systems in the country region one lives. So this is really cool because they talk about countries. So that also, when we have some people that are viewing us in other parts of the world, this also can relate to you. If you're not, this is not just specifically United States. It's something that can be internationally seen as something that's important too in regards to knowledge, understanding this. Acquire specific knowledge about the cultural group with which one works. Discriminate and attack barriers that prevent people from minoritized groups' use of behavioral services. Identify possibly contradicted treatment due to cultural variables and conduct risk assessments. Identify how behaviors related to ethical dilemmas and decision making vary across cultures. Discriminate and attack the role of cultural variables in the supervision and training of trainees. Attack differences in defining targets, preferences for treatment, and treatment effects across cultures. And then for skills, self-monitor relationships with clients and caregivers and prevent and disrupt biases. Respond effectively to feedback on mistake one emits related to cultural differences. Practice self-compassion with oneself when confronted with challenges during the lifelong learning process and following the mission of mistakes regarding cultural differences. Respond to cultural cues and communicate effectively with all forms of verbal behavior, vocal and gesture. Deliver culturally responsive interventions to clients as needed. Engage in a variety of rapport-building behaviors. Adapt treatment based on cultural variables. Ask open-ended questions and actively listen to caregivers' concerns. Collaborate with caregivers on treatment goals and treatment selection. Offer choices of treatment components. Conduct risk assessments if using potentially contradicted treatments and comprehensive monitoring plan. Utilize a decision-making model and understand the context related to cultural variables when making ethical decisions. Seek and incorporate feedback from others to improve future performance. Conduct social validity assessments throughout the assessment and treatment process. Now that one's really important, the whole aspect of providing questionnaires and conducting some type of social validity with all the clients you serve. That really helps understand and get some feedback about how they feel about the services that you're providing. Because we all have our own perspective, right? We may think that we're doing great and it's all awesome, but the families might feel otherwise about it. Okay. What else do we see here? So it is critical to consider how the author's own cultural variables impact their selections, inclusion of participant, particular research questions, and prior research. Therefore, the research areas in this paper are non-exhaustive, and we encourage others to identify other avenues if needed. So they're just saying that they're going to provide some information here that may help, hopefully, create an opportunity for you guys to start thinking about research and how these particular areas of diversity can be addressed specifically for self-assessment. Okay. This paper does not describe culturally responsive behavior analytic practices, but we encourage readers to see Jimenez Gomez and Bilulo for an in-depth discussion of cultural responsiveness in behavior assessment and treatment. In Jimenez Gomez and Bilulo accepted, we discuss ways to incorporate the awareness, knowledge, and skill dimensions into more culturally responsive practices. Here we focus on starting point for culturally responsive applied behavior analytic services, which is the development of the awareness dimension. So they're really going to focus on awareness in this particular one. This is about understanding once again what you know and your own biases. So that's really the focus here. So I'm gonna skip some of this here. We're gonna go down here. Okay, so here you go. So the first step of self-assessment is to identify one's own culture. So you want to do that. Figure 1 provides an example of a cultural identity map that can be used to better understand one's own culture, which is pretty cool. They actually provide an example how that looks. Like literally you put your name here And then you can start answering some of these questions. So like, for example, describe your gender identity. How does your family celebrate big occasions or graduations? Who prepares meals in your family? Which holidays do you celebrate and how? So it's a variety of questions here that can help you understand a bit more of your culture, right? Where you come from. Most self-assessment tools prompt the user to engage in a variety of interverbal regarding their beliefs, values, and practices, and will require the individual completing them to behave as both the speaker and listener with respect to the responses. Okay. So numerous resources exist online to aid behavior analysts in learning more about groups that differ from them. So this is something that I want to do. This is 2 textbooks that they're definitely my to-do list to read. The Multiculturalism and Diversity and Applied Behavior Analysis by Connors and Capel, 2020, and Counseling the Culturally Diverse. So 2 very important tools in regards to understanding diversity. Okay, so they actually recommend those as well. So here, the different sites that you can visit in regards to understanding for the whole aspect of promoting the self-awareness. They actually have different questions that you can answer and quizzes you can take to be able to understand, once again, your own biases and also your own background a bit more. So the whole self-awareness, or the awareness part of it, is something that's you can gain here through this particular site. So once again, the link for the article is going to be there. You can all visit these particular links and take a give it a try. Try some of these particular tests. And I think if you're a supervisor that's supervising, trainees, and you're trying to definitely get them to start practicing and incorporating the whole aspect of awareness, the dimension of awareness for the cultural diversity, this is something you can utilize as well. Okay. Here we are, so some more. So however, when acquiring knowledge about groups, one must be careful not to develop stereotypes and instead use a posture of cultural humility. Once again, the word humility is so important, as there are many subcultures within cultures and not every person adheres to the same practices within a culture. So for example, not all Catholics attend weekly mass, not all Latinx people are fluent in Spanish. In sum, the primary practice recommendation is for behavior analysts to conduct self-assessments on their cultural backgrounds to better understand their own culture and how their culture impacts their values, beliefs, choices, and behaviors, while also learning about individuals who belong to other groups. Developing self-awareness skills takes time and requires regular practice of self-assessment and self-reflection. Okay, so once again, it's something that does require effort. It's not something that can happen overnight. Okay, so this is something that they also provided here in this article, which is providing a variety of research questions that can be looked at if you're interested in research. And what's really cool, they even give you the dimension that you could be addressing. So for example, awareness, and here it says evaluating best practices to teach a self-assessment. So number 1, identifying best practices to teach both students training to become behavior analysts and practicing behavior analysts and researchers about their own culture. Great idea. I love that. That's a really good one. Comparing self-assessment teaching methods, for example, evaluating the difference of an individual engaging in self-assessment on their own versus working with small groups. Okay, so another idea. So I'm not going to read all of these guys because it's a variety of different areas here, but these are really awesome, research questions. The authors emphasize that these are not the end of all. This is not the only questions you could ever have for self-assessment specifically or other areas of diversity. They're just giving you some ideas of stuff that you can research, stuff that they have really thought about that can help further the research in diversity. So really appreciate that information from the authors. I'm going to finish this article out with the summary. So here it says, applied behavior analysts work with diverse populations and need to provide culturally responsive services. Research in other disciplines has taught us that self-awareness is a critical starting place for delivering more culturally responsive services. In this paper, we describe current practices within and outside of ABA in their areas of self-assessment with the aim of providing practice recommendations and inspiring further research. This paper was not meant as an exhaustive list of potential research needs or as a complete practice guide to self-assessment. The purpose was to consolidate extant information and to identify areas of needed growth. This paper provides a framework for discussing cultural responsiveness in ABA, practice recommendations for behavior analysis in the area of self-assessment, and suggestions for research to identify best practices in self-assessment as it relates to cultural responsiveness in ABA as the field expands and adapts to meet the needs of an increasingly more diverse population. Awesome. Okay, so there you go. That right there's a summary for this particular article. You have the references here. They have some really awesome references that you might want to take a look at. The name of this particular article, once again, is Cultural Responsiveness in Applied Behavior Analysis self-assessment. Okay, and this particular article was published in 2022. Okay, 2022. I'm curious to see if there's some more recent research there from these particular authors who did a phenomenal job. I really appreciate this particular type of work because it not only provides information about something, it gives you solutions, right? Or at least a start to a solution. I think that's something that I really, really much appreciate in this particular article. Thank you so much for all that were able to, follow along with this particular segment in diversity. I appreciate all of those that are subscribing to the channel, giving us likes and all that good stuff, giving us a lot of great support. I look forward to see you all next week. Take care.